This is Alex and Chris from OPW Live, and you are watching the top 6 Elimination Chamber matches of all time. With Elimination Chamber 2023 coming up on the horizon, we at OPW Live thought it would be time to highlight our top matches. The Elimination Chamber was a match concept invented by Triple H in 2002, but introduced on camera by Eric Bischoff. It's a match for the WWE Championship. The chamber was a circular steel cage structure with a domed roof and 4 pods in each quadrant facing the corners of the ring. 2 men would start the match, and then 4 would be locked in the pods and be released into the match at regular intervals. And elimination occurred via pinfall or submission inside the structure. There have been variants over the years, such as the Extreme Elimination Chamber in 2005 for ECW December to Dismember. The tag team titles were first defended in 2015, and that added the tag teams into the chamber match instead. And the chamber would go on a brief hiatus after that to be redesigned in 2017 to its current look today, a octagonal structure with 4 pods still in the corners of the ring, but a cage that is much lighter, much easier to see through for both the fans watching the arena and for us at home, and much better designed so that it fits in arenas around the country. There have been 30 Elimination Chamber matches in WWE history, and it's time for our top 6.
Number 6 comes to us from Elimination Chamber 2021, as Daniel Bryan defeated Cesaro, Jey Uso, Kevin Owens, King Corbin, and Sami Zayn for an immediate title match against the Universal Champion Roman Reigns.
Yep.
So I'm possibly showing a little bit of recency bias with this pick, but I really enjoyed that story going in and out of the chamber match, which, in fairness, that's something that we kind of factored in with all of our rankings. But for this particular year, it was a very fun story coming in and out.
Right. For us at OPW Live, the storylines matter just as much as the matches themselves. That's why we watch wrestling.
So to recap, just a few weeks prior, Edge had won the Royal Rumble. We were waiting to see what was happening with that, but in the meantime, we saw Paul Heyman using a contract loophole to help Roman avoid having to defend the title in the chamber match itself. But as we would find out, he would need to still defend it at the event, setting up a championship match for immediately after the chamber match.
So the match started with Daniel Bryan and Cesaro as the other entrants entered. Daniel Bryan went the distance, but we had a big performance from Jey Uso, who eliminated both Kevin Owens and Cesaro before ultimately being eliminated by the winner of Daniel Bryan. After the match, the chamber lifted, and you know what happened next.
Oh boy, do I remember that. I still remember that moment because
it wasn't even a surprising moment because we knew it was going to happen. Mm-hmm. Actually, I take that back. It was a little surprising because I thought he would have the match later in the night.
Yes, that much I remember too. So they were lifting the chamber. I'm trying to remember if it was as the chamber was being lifted up or just after.
Yeah, it was as the chamber was being lifted up.
They started playing.
The strange thing about where we were at here was we were still in the Thunderdome era at this point. So there was no live crowd. So it was just chamber being lifted up, Daniel Bryan in the ring, crowd noise being piped in the Thunderdome with the LED TVs of the fans, right? And then Roman Reigns' music hits. He walks out with Paul Heyman. And Michael Cole freaks out about how we're having the match right now, you know.
Yeah. I was right there with Cole in that moment, to be honest.
Yeah, like I said, I thought it was going to happen later in the night because that's the quote-unquote fair thing to do in kayfabe. But it was clear that the whole point of this was not to have a fair match. Mm-hmm. But even then, like, they did do a false finish where Daniel Bryan did lock in the yes lock, I think, twice.
Yeah.
During their little match before ultimately Roman Reigns speared Daniel Bryan. Or no, put him in the guillotine, actually. Put him in the guillotine choke, choked him out. That was the end of that.
Yeah.
And the last thing we liked about this match was what happened after that, right?
As mentioned earlier, we'd seen Edge win the Royal Rumble, but there were some questions on what championship Edge would actually go after, as you tend to see happen after pretty much most Royal Rumbles during like when we have the brand split. Any questions or doubts about what title he was going after? came to a crashing end when Edge speared Roman shortly after that match happened, and then pointed at the WrestleMania sign, giving us our
Good old
answer.
pointing. Number 5 came to us from Elimination Chamber 2020 when Shayna Baszler defeated Natalya, Liv Morgan, Asuka, Ruby Riott, and Sarah Logan for a WWE Raw Championships match at WrestleMania. What can we say about this match except it was unlike any of the previous chamber matches in WWE history up to this point? Um, Shayna Baszler was not the first entrant. There was Natalia started the match with Ruby Riott. Sarah Logan came in, but once Shayna Baszler came in, the match quickly changed as Shayna Baszler started submitting the women left, right, and center, quickly eliminating Sarah Logan, Ruby Riott, and Natalia. Wrestling a little bit with Liv Morgan and Asuka before ultimately putting down Asuka after a short 21-minute match. Shayna Baszler became the first person in WWE history to run the gauntlet in the Elimination Chamber and eliminate everyone else.
Yeah, gosh, that was. I'm still kind of. I'm still kind of surprised by how. I don't. I think it spoke a lot to Shayna's character in that particular match. Just like,
And at the time,
just how dominant
she had just come off her great NXT run and was starting
Right.
to make waves on the main roster. She was kind of like up and down on the main roster for a bit, but then in this match, they kind of revitalized her character a little bit
Yeah.
for this match and heading into WrestleMania. Um, the reason we rank this as number 5 is simply because Shayna Baszler did something that no one else had done up to this point in Chamber history. We saw it happen again with Brock Lesnar a couple years later, but you never forget your first. Shayna Baszler running the table, women's elimination chamber match, main event for a match at WrestleMania. Doesn't get better than that.
Number 4 comes to us from Elimination Chamber 2015, the first tag team Elimination Chamber for the WWE Tag Team Championship, which saw the New Day of Big E, Kofi, and Xavier Woods defeat Cesaro and Tyson Kidd, Los Matadores, the Ascension, the Lucha Dragons, and the Primetime Players. So, after more than a decade, the Elimination Chamber was bound to go in this direction. And on a show featuring Kevin Owens facing John Cena, and headlined by Seth Rollins and Dean Ambrose battling for the WWE World Heavyweight Championship, this would be one of 2 chamber matches for a WWE Network special event, and boy, was this a fun match.
It was. So, we already had this history making moment. And I don't use that term lightly because I know WWE likes to overuse history as their theme. But this really was, right? We'd never seen more than 6 people in a chamber. We had never seen tag teams in the chamber and so many people in the chamber at once. In fact, the New Day wrestled as a trio, kind of like an unfair advantage for them. Not only did they enter in last, but the 3 of them were stuck in the same pod, which was kind of funny because Big E is massive, right? But they were in a pod together to begin with, and just having so many people kind of in the ring at once. We saw the Ascension and Lucha Dragons started out, and the Ascension got the first 2 eliminations actually against the Lucha Dragons and Los Matadores before the Primetime Players, kind of cleaned up and were the last team against Big E, Kofi Kingston, and Xavier Woods. It was still very odd kind of watching at the time, and even looking back, why WWE decided to let the 3 of them wrestle. Because normally it was a combination of 2 of them. You would have Big E and Kofi, or Kofi and Xavier, or Big E and Xavier. But for some reason, they added all 3 to the match.
Yeah, and it's funny because even just looking back at the names in this match is just a trip. Like this had Cesaro and Tyson Kidd in the midst of a hell of a run as a tag team. You also had, and it's interesting to see them along with the Primetime Players, the Ascension. I almost forgot.
This is
I'd almost forgot
kind of like the high point of the Ascension's career, because it was shortly after this they started losing the Legends, and that was the end of them. Interesting that like the Usos were not in this match. I don't know what was going on with them at the time. Maybe that one of them was hurt, because you would think one of the most decorated tag teams of all time would have been in it otherwise. But it's just what it is. And we also had some memorable spots, like Kofi Kingston climbing to the top of the roof and then falling down. And onto the pile of all the tag teams that were still in the ring at that point. We didn't get our first elimination until about 10 minutes in, and that's about the time where I think everyone's in the match at that point because it's like 2 minute intervals.
That's right.
So
Yeah.
we did have a very short period where all 13 competitors were kind of in the chamber at once. Even though I think the Los Matadores were eliminated and still trying to get out of the chamber at that point, like you still had just this massive humanity. And this was the last event for the old chamber style too, so like it was really chaotic in a way to see through because
Hmm.
the old style round cage, it had like 4 layers of cage, and so it was just very hard to see like from a live standpoint, from a camera standpoint, and I'm certainly the live crowd probably had a hard time too. So it was just massive chaos in this ring, and that's why we picked this here. All right, our number 3 match comes to us from Elimination Chamber 2019, and this is the match where Daniel Bryan defeated Samoa Joe, Randy Orton, AJ Styles, Jeff Hardy, and Kofi Kingston. But that's not why it's ranked. Not because Daniel Bryan won, but because of what happened before this match, during this match, and after this match. So this is something that's very important to us, is story, right? Leading into this match, the 6 competitors were announced, and in fact, Kofi Kingston was not announced as one of the competitors. It was Mustafa Ali taking that 6th spot. But an unfortunate injury to Ali prior to Elimination Chamber opened up that spot for Kofi Kingston, and he wrestled for an hour, almost won a gauntlet match to determine the last entrant into the Chamber match. And this was kind of the genesis of Kofi Mania, right?
Right. It was crazy to see that gauntlet match on SmackDown. You realize Orton, pulling out the victory to get that last like entrant.
I mean, it was a special thing. We
Mhm.
hadn't seen anything like Kofi Mania since Daniel Bryan, right? In 5 years prior,
Which,
when we, as the fans, did the Occupy Raw thing, right?
yeah, which
Um,
it's funny you bring that up because that obviously Daniel being not only the champion going into this match but being a heel. Daniel, okay, just sorry as a quick aside, Daniel Bryan is the Earth's champion as a heel.
that's one of my favorite gimmicks of all time.
It really is such a good gimmick, and
This
I
is this is right when Daniel Bryan introduced the Wooden Championship too.
yes,
I think he introduced it as a result of winning this match.
yes, I do,
The
yeah.
Wooden Championship with like the gemstones and
Hmm. The hemp
the hemp.
belt itself,
Yes,
yes.
the
Oh
hemp
god,
and wood championship. One of my favorite championship designs.
oh
Very
gosh.
underrated. I know people didn't like that, but you're not supposed to like the heel, right? But I thought it was awesome.
It,
But
yeah, and yeah, and between yeah, and the whole storyline going into Mania 35, I think really kind of helped turn things on its head. Like you said, this was kind of a
yeah, this was a big stop in Kofi Mania, and it was nice as during this match you really could tell and hear the fan support for Kofi Kingston as the match went on, as he kept, he went deeper into the match. Kofi Kingston was the first entrant in after the
mhm,
two who started, which I think was Samoa Joe and Daniel Bryan. Um, and when Kofi Kingston hit Trouble in Paradise on Randy Orton and eliminated him, and we all know the history between Kofi Kingston and Randy Orton that had
mhm.
spanned back, a decade prior. It was just a groundswell of a moment. And then Kofi and Daniel Bryan wrestled for like another 10 minutes after Orton was gone, near fall after near fall. And ultimately, Daniel Bryan won at the end, but the damage was done. You know,
Yeah, God. Hell of
Kofi
a
Kofi
match.
Mania was the genesis was started, and what followed was one of my favorite storylines of the last 10 years. Was getting Kofi Kingston into WrestleMania against Daniel Bryan.
Number 2 comes to us from SummerSlam 2003. And this would be the Elimination Chamber for the World Heavyweight Championship that saw Triple H defeat Chris Jericho, Goldberg, Kevin Nash, Randy Orton, and Shawn Michaels. Oh, now the build up to this one was interesting because it was built up starting at a press conference for SummerSlam, in which Bischoff had announced that Triple H would defend against Goldberg in a singles match. Things took an interesting twist from there because then it would be announced that singles match was then changed to a no DQ match, and then the co-general manager at the time, Stone Cold, announced that Triple H would in fact be defending the title in the Elimination Chamber. And this was a big deal because, just a few months prior, we had seen the first ever Elimination Chamber at Survivor Series 2002. But you know how it goes sometimes. Sometimes the sequel manages to actually surpass the original, and at least in my opinion, that's kind of what we saw here, with some really big names as well.
Yeah, we saw a lot of tenets in this chamber match that we'd see in the future, such as Goldberg going on a run of eliminations. We would see that in the future of people getting maybe 3 or 4 eliminations before either winning or ultimately not winning. We saw that a couple times. It's kind of the genesis to what Shayna Baszler and Brock Lesnar did 2 decades later. But you know, this match was kind of the first time that the Elimination Chamber match went from being a gimmick to a staple.
Mm-hmm.
Because after this match, they would start regularly having Elimination Chamber matches, starting with New Year's Revolution in 2005 and doing that for a couple of years. And just moving beyond a concept of let's just throw a bunch of cages, right, and see what happens. It became a staple for championship matches. The next 10 would be, 10, 15 matches would all be championship matches, right?
Yeah, and we saw some really interesting storyline developments throughout the build of this match and even coming out of this match. For example, this was like during kind of this is as Evolution was developing more and more as a stable, and so we'd see that kind of come into play. And
Yeah, because we'd see Orton and Triple H kind of tease some contact during the match, but never really got to it, and that's partly because Goldberg went and eliminated Orton pretty
yeah,
early on after Triple H entered the match. And I think at this point in Chamber history, I think the intervals were a little bit longer for the entrance,
right,
whereas they were like almost 5 minutes, perhaps, whereas now they're kind of like 2 minute intervals,
yeah,
something like that. And surprisingly, Kevin Nash was in this match,
yeah,
which when we were reviewing this in our pre-production, I was like, wow, Kevin Nash was in this. Chris Jericho got that elimination. Good for him. Nothing else can say. Like this is a classic chamber match, the second ever, and that's why we put it on this list. Before we get to number one, let's list off some honorable mentions. How can we mention the Elimination Chamber without mentioning the first match in Elimination Chamber history? Survivor Series 2002, Shawn Michaels won. We also had a couple of other history-making moments. The first women's chamber match in 2018 that Alexa Bliss won for the Raw Women's Championship. As the champion, she defended the title successfully. And then the following year, we had the introduction of the WWE Women's Tag Team titles that the Boston Hug Connection, Bayley and Sasha Banks, also won. And now it's time for number one. The number one chamber match of all time comes to us from New Year's Revolution 2006, when John Cena defeated Carlito, Chris Masters, Shawn Michaels, Kane, and Kurt Angle for the WWE Championship. This is very special to me. This is the first chamber match I saw on pay-per-view. I was still a teenager, and so I didn't really have control over of buying these pay-per-views. But my grandfather did buy this pay-per-view, and I do remember watching and seeing these young stars, right? Because Carlito was in this, Chris Masters was in this, Kurt Angle was still relatively young at this point, I think still in his 20s, and of course, John Cena doing this thing. But the reason this is number one is not just for that great match. This is an all-time great match by itself, but because of the moment that happened afterwards. The chamber being opened, John Cena celebrating / recovering in the ring, and Vince McMahon's music hits, and he announces that Edge is cashing in the Money in the Bank contract. This was the first Money in the Bank contract that guaranteed the holder a championship match at a time and place of their choosing. And this is the first time that the contract was used like this. Edge spared Cena for a near fall. Cena kicked out, and you thought, oh man, Cena's going to do Super Cena. But Edge got him again and won the title in the first ever Money in the Bank cash in.
yeah. Gosh, you just reminded me about some details with that cash in too. I was just thinking about that. It's like, because I'm so used to like all the usual like tropes that have come from cash ins. Like,
this was the first.
Yeah, well, yeah, this was the first, so they had to set the precedent somehow. But I'm just like, I'm so used to the trope of that person's music hits, you see them coming out with the briefcase. But this one was like, no, hold on, they made a really big deal out of that very first cash in. Understandable. But I'm just like, that's right. McMahon came out first to announce that cash in happening, which I think added. I want to say it added at least a little bit to the heat and the drama of that, because, like you said, that happened, so shortly after Cena won the
It
match.
created something new in WWE wrestling because Edge had won the case like 11 months prior, I think. I think he got it at WrestleMania the
Yeah,
previous year.
yeah. So like,
So he had
10 to
held
11
on to
months.
this case for a long time,
Mm-hmm.
and people were wondering at the time, like, what's Edge going to do with the briefcase? Like, is he going to say, I'm going to challenge for it at WrestleMania? Is he going to just pick a Raw? And since we had no concept of the cash in,
Mm-hmm.
you were thinking, okay, he's going to declare a match at some point, right? He's going to take
Right,
out the contract and say, we're going to have this match on this day.
right.
And when he came out and handed the briefcase to Mr. McMahon and ran down, and you saw the possibilities with the Money in the Bank cash in, that with the fact that this was such a wonderful match featuring, some of the younger guys, like Chris Masters and Carlito lasted to the end with John Cena.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't, like Kurt Angle, Kane, Shawn Michaels were the first three eliminations. Carlito and Chris Masters actually kind of dominated this match as a duo, and it was just a great thing to see. It was one of the high points of the so-called ruthless aggression era,
Yeah.
right? Where these young stars, and John Cena was a young star at this point too,
Mm-hmm.
were like the highlight of this match, and
Now,
Kurt Angle, Kane, Shawn Michaels, who've been around for a while,
mhm.
kind of stepped aside a little bit.
Yeah. Now, quick question. Remind me. Was this I can't help but think this was either what started or at least an early chapter in the rivalry between Cena and Edge as well that we saw
This is what
throughout
started
much.
it.
Yeah, this because that lasted much of
Unfortunately,
2006.
John Cena would win the title back at the Royal Rumble, so it was a
Mm-hmm.
very short reign for Edge. But this is where we got the celebration sex scene, or
Oh
live
god,
sex
yeah.
celebration was the next night for Edge and Lita, when Edge was like coming into his own as the rated R superstar,
Mm-hmm.
and it was just the the pacing of this match was brilliant, and the historical ramifications of what happened after this match is why we have named this number one. Do you agree with our list? You can comment below and let us know. You can also subscribe to OPW Live at Power, the number two, the Smarks, wherever there is social media here on YouTube, on Twitter, and on Twitch. Thank you all for watching. Alex, play us out.
Remember the Thunderdome? Holy